So I found this to be really cool too. He has 8 critical structures and questions in this thought process. So I thought this was just awesome. The critical structures here are: what is the purpose or the goal in your thinking? Some critical questions. What data, facts, and experience do we have to look at the problem? Interpret data and facts. So we're going to look at the data and the facts and see what conclusions we would make. The concepts or ideas that can be applied. Is there other work being done or concepts to tie all this data together? What assumptions are we making? So you might look at a problem and assume, say, that we're on planet Earth and that there's regular gravitational pull from the Earth. But the assumption might be different if you're Elon Musk or one of the brilliant scientists that work on the space station. So the assumptions might be different in other environments. If you were looking at educational issues, assumptions might be made about the environment that students are being brought up in. If they're in an impoverished area, maybe in Africa, maybe you make the wrong assumption that they have all the materials that they need. So these are things to think about. What are the implications and consequences of our assumptions? So what if we assume something that's not true? How will that change the problem? And so whether you think you think within a point of view. Whatever you think within a point of view is the last one. And so what is your inherent biases that you bring into the problem? And how can you structure your thinking to eliminate as much of the bias as possible? All right. There are 8 questions or questions at least that you could ask of any thinking. Okay. So the first part was structures, and this is questions, and there's some overlap here, but I think it's interesting to read these. What's the purpose, or what's the question? Okay, so the very first structures were purpose or goal, and so the questions could be: what's the purpose of our thinking? What is the essential question? What data do we have to work with? So that's a little bit of an overlap. How are you interpreting this data? Are you using some sort of randomized design, or are you just taking it for face value? Are there actual differences between the measurements, or are some of the differences due to chance? Okay, so things to think about. What are the key concepts or ideas we need to understand here? Okay, so certainly in the sciences, we have some base knowledge that we use to apply to problems, relationships between variables. And so what would that be? If you were in the political sphere, you might say, well, what are the key concepts or ideas that different political groups have and hold true? Do they always hold true, or are there exceptions to those? Number 5, what are we taking for granted? Okay, so there may be some things that you just think are, going to happen that might not happen. And so in a physics experiment, you talk about stopping distances. Well, are we taking for granted that the stopping distance is on a dry road or a wet road? So those are some things that maybe you're taking for granted that you might not should. What are the, number 6, what are the implications of proceeding? Okay, so what happens when we make a decision? What are the outcomes that could happen? How are we looking at this? Okay, so what's our perspective on things? Do we have some inherent biases? Is there any other way of thinking about the problem? Okay, and so this is one of those things where you want to have a period of just total abandon in terms of your thinking. So you want to get outside the box and think about, generate ideas to solve problems. And then after you generate these ideas, it should be in an environment where it's safe for people to come up with silly ideas. And maybe a silly idea is not so silly after all after you analyze it. But most of those ideas are thrown out. But it's the process of brainstorming and coming up with things. And we'll talk about the Disney method here in one of the videos, and we'll talk about the whole process of creative problem solving.